It's a real pleasure to be here with you today and to be able to talk to you about why you and your business, and indeed every business, needs a game plan for disruption. And I think it feels really relevant at the moment because we're in this period of just incredible disruption, aren't we, globally? And it's really a time when, coming to what feels as though it might be the end, it's tempting to think that actually perhaps we can return to normal, that we can get back to how things were, this kind of sunny upland of the world before COVID. But I think what most of us are starting to realise is that actually, there is no pathway back to how things were. We're looking at a very different future picture. And certainly something that Ruth and I realised some time ago is that actually, COVID is just an example of a string of disruptions, emerging risks and trends that have the capability to really to challenge how we do our thing in our businesses and to really impact how we drive value on an ongoing basis. So what I wanted to really get you to think about today was how we can really use this window of opportunity we have, this kind of unique moment to redesign, to rethink, and to remake the world that we live in, and specifically to think about the role of our businesses within that. And for Ruth and I, that's fundamentally a conversation about value. How do you drive value in a disrupted environment? And so what I wanted to do was to really kind of bring that question to life for you across the course of this very short talk. In the first part, I'm going to share a couple of stories and actually show you a couple of objects, I think, which should help to bring the stories to life. And those are stories about disruption and how it impacts established businesses. And in the second part, I want to talk a little bit more about Ruth and I. So our kind of particular passion for addressing the issue of driving value from disruption, and then the kind of tools and the assets and the products and solutions that we've created around that. So let's start with this question of what disruption is and explore that in a little bit more depth. And I think the initial kind of thing I would throw out there are the examples that you know already, of course. So, why didn't Kodak invent Instagram? Why didn't the taxi industry see Uber coming? Why did Netflix manage to eat Blockbuster's lunch so effectively? And really, as far as Ruth and I are concerned, there's a simple answer to that and a simple thing that they have in common, which is that the leaders of those incumbent businesses failed to look up and out at an opportunity to create new value, and instead just sought to preserve the value that they had. And for us, that's a hiding to nothing. That's a strategy that will end in failure. And that's really why you need to have a game plan for driving value in the world that we're moving into. So let me just share a couple of examples. And what I would ask you to be thinking about while I share these examples is, if these disruptors entered my market or something similar entered my market, how would it cause me to think, react, respond? And how would I set about addressing the challenge that was presented? And I just leave you with that question in the background. And what I thought we'd do is start with an industry that actually almost feels indestructible. I mean, you would never, it's like the Titanic, you would never say that about your own industry. It feels like you're asking for trouble. But I want to start with a 1,000-year-old industry. So the whiskey industry, which of course, as a Scot, is very close to my heart. But the whiskey industry, really, when you think about it, hasn't changed much for the last 1,000 years. So distillation was first introduced to the UK by some monks over 1,000 years ago. And actually, they would probably recognise the way that we still produce whiskey today. Because it's basically the same as what they taught us to do all that time ago. So we take a kind of base alcohol, we put it into a cask to mature, a barrel to mature over a period of time, sometimes 10, 15, 20 years or more. And at the end of that process, we get a product which is bottled, but which is really high value from a consumer point of view, and also probably has a high price tag attached to it to reflect that value. And so if we think about how you might go about disrupting an industry like that, it feels like a difficult question because it's such an established industry. In fact, the industry at the moment is worth 4.5, or the Scotch whisky industry alone is worth 4.5 billion around the globe. So how might you start to think differently, address, disrupt that industry? Well, I have an example for you, which I think should help to trigger some different thinking. And I just want to show you this item. So this is what's known as a whiskey element. And this came from the just a simple disruptive thought that, perhaps instead of putting the whiskey in the barrel and waiting for, 25 years to get something really nice at the other end, maybe we could put the barrel in the whiskey. And what you'll see here is actually on this small stick, you'll see there are lots of little cuts here, which creates a bigger surface area to allow the reaction to take place between the whiskey and the wood. And you'll see that the wood is also slightly charged. You can get lots of different versions of this product. And how it works is really simple. So instead of having to go to a well-known distiller to buy your product, or to one of the big brands like a Diageo or an individual distillery, you could go to your corner shop and you could buy a bottle of cheapo whiskey, and you could pop this whiskey element into it to replicate that aging process that goes on in the traditional whiskey industry. But the key difference here is that, instead of waiting 25 years for the outcome, with this, you can get that outcome in 24 hours. So I take the bottle of whiskey, I pop it in, I leave it overnight. The following day, when I pour it out, it tastes just like a single malt. And that's been taste tested and confirmed. And this is a real product, and it's sold around the world. So as soon as that happens, as soon as someone challenges the industry in that way, we have to question where the value sits. In the old model, we could say it perhaps sat in heritage for sure, in geography. That's absolutely true. It's true of so many products actually that the value sits in geography. The value also sits in time in the traditional whiskey making process. And here we've got something where the value is actually completely different. The value is experience, it's experimentation, and also the ownership of the value is no longer with the distillery on the kind of left-hand side of the value chain, but it's with the consumer on the far right of the value chain. So potentially hugely disruptive for the industry. And I just want you to be thinking about, where does the value sit in your industry, and where are the areas that a disruptor might attack, and how could they do that? With this as a little bit of inspiration. So that's item one, the whiskey element. Whiskey industry has been around for a long time. I want to look at another industry that's been around for a long time, but where there has been some innovation recently. So this is the dentistry industry. Technology's had a huge impact on the way that dentistry is delivered, of course. Thankfully, we're no longer just getting teeth yanked out after perhaps a glass of whiskey. And actually, I wanted to talk particularly about tooth straightening in the context of the industry as a whole, and to show you this item. So some of you watching this may well have had your teeth straightened at some point in your life. And if you did that in the last 20 years or so, it probably was with something like an Invisalign clear aligner. And the reason it would likely have been Invisalign is because Invisalign invented and held the patents for this technology, which was a real game changer when it came onto the market. How does this industry work at the moment? So currently, you would go to probably your own dentist, who might refer you to an orthodontist, who could then prescribe this treatment, who would do all of the detailed steps of understanding what you wanted to get out of it, taking the molds of your teeth, and then planning that treatment journey. There's a good chance the treatment journey would be a couple of years long for the most kind of severe misalignments, and probably as a whole, it would cost you about £4,000 or £6,000 to have those issues corrected. And then you're looking at probably visiting your orthodontist once a fortnight as part of that process. Now, for most of us, we're fine with that, because we felt that the value in this industry was about expertise. It was about the orthodontist. It was the healthcare angle. It was something that was a specialist service. And that we needed to go regularly, because it's an important thing, getting our teeth fixed, and we only trust this person to do that for us. Interestingly, that has changed really radically in the last couple of years, because in 2017, Invisalign actually, the patents started to run out on Invisalign, and some of the key ones ran out in 2017. So suddenly, lots of disruptors who'd been poised to enter this market, who'd already started to think about the business model and the plan, leapt in and started producing these invisible aligners themselves. And I want to talk about one of those disruptors at a business called Smile Direct Club. So Smile Direct Club said actually the value here is not really in the expertise, because we have so much data in the system that actually the expertise is really, or the value rather, is really in what technology can do with that data, what we know about teeth straightening, the information that we already have. And so Smile Direct Club said, look, instead of you going to see an orthodontist and have them do things by sight and using molds, we will 3D scan the teeth, and we'll do that not in a dentist surgery, we'll do it in a high street shop. And we'll have somebody do that who has no dental or medical qualifications whatsoever. Having been through that process, we'll use that data and we'll use artificial intelligence to then model the straightening journey that the teeth that need to go on. And again, there might be an orthodontist that checks that at the very end of the process, but everything else is done by the technology alone. And then what's the outcome for the consumer there? Well, the consumer has that one face-to-face visit, and then the entire treatment course is mailed to them at home for them to administer. They have access to an orthodontist or a dentist if they need that, but it's online, of course. The overall treatment time is a quarter of the treatment time on average of traditional Invisalign, and the cost is a quarter as well. So a pretty appealing product for anyone who was previously excluded from that market. Now, lots of reaction from dentists at the beginning that this would be unsafe and that it shouldn't be trusted, but actually, 3 or 4 years down the line, this is a huge business with a multi-billion-dollar valuation. That is really transforming the way that we think about this market. So again, a disruptor who attacked value in the market. As consumers, previously we valued expertise, we valued that medical knowledge. In the new model, we value speed, cost, price, technology, efficiency, all of those things. So again, even where a disruptor, where an incumbent really owns the product from end to end, they fail to even acknowledge that their own patents might expire and that someone new can enter the market. And so I think you can see in both of those cases that part of the issue that Ruth and I are really trying to address is that inability of leaders within an established market to really imagine and think differently about what could change as a result of disruption. And so that's why we've developed the toolkit that we have to help you to do that. And so really that's fundamentally about shifting from a reactive mindset, one that often is actually about fear or denial, and shifting into something that's much more proactive. So a real design approach to the future for your business. And for us, really a key part of that is the ability to connect two parts of your business that may not currently work well together. And that's the part of your business that deals with risk and the part of your innovation, the business that deals with innovation. And the challenge that most businesses have, and the challenge that we see all the time, is that those two parts of the business act as silos. They rarely talk to each other. In fact, often they're set up in conflict. And that's something that we see all the time. And that creates a suboptimal situation because, of course, disruption includes innovation and risk at the same time. So you need to be able to have those parts of your business work together and think together about the response. And, Ruth and I have been battling this problem of silos since 2014. And there's a lot more around our own stories and some of the challenges that we've faced on the disruptiongameplan.com website, where there are some videos that tell more of the story. But I guess for today, the key point to make is that fundamentally, if those two parts of your business are not working together, you will not be able to drive value from disruption. And so what we set out to do is actually to make it easier, really, for you to enable that communication, and not just between risk and innovation, but actually between everyone on your leadership team and all the key people who matter inside and outside your organization to make a sensible and deliverable game plan. And to do that, we've created a framework, a 4-step framework, which takes you through each stage of thinking and action to develop that game plan for dealing with disruption. And it's a framework, but it's not a list. I think that's a really important point to make. So we talk about the first step being to stimulate and motivate the leadership team. The second step being to facilitate debate, a challenging and open debate. The third step being to develop strategies to innovate and mitigate in response. And the fourth step is to update the plan and anticipate on an ongoing basis what might change. And of course, really, what we're talking about there is a loop of activity, an ongoing loop. So let me give you a little bit more detail about the individual steps. So stimulate and motivate, first of all. We've actually had a little bit of a taster of that this morning. That was the reason for giving you those couple of stories, that little bit of stimulus, because what we find is one of the main challenges for business in looking forward is that actually leaders are tempted to look forward based on what they already know. So they're not necessarily open to understanding what might change and how it might change, but rather they make assumptions based on what has happened and what is happening. And that's a really narrow view to take, and it creates an awful lot of blind spots. So the purpose of the stimulate and motivate step is to really expand horizons, create a really rich discussion and exchange of ideas, and fundamentally to expand the imagination of your leadership team, because you need to be able to see not just one future, not the future that you fear or the future that you want, but actually you need to be able to see a range of possible futures and understand how you can build a flexible and adaptive path to value through all of those different possible futures. So once you've done that, it's a really kind of creative exercise, and actually it's uncomfortable for a lot of people. So it's not as easy as it sounds. Once you've got to the end of that process, it's really important to start to nail down the information that you've listened to, observed, touched, talked about, to a framework that really is relevant for your business. And when I say relevant, I don't mean to your business today as it is now and nailed down to every structure that you currently have in place, but rather that's nailed down to the system of value that surrounds your business. So from the producing elements of your value chain on the left-hand side through to the delivery elements on the right-hand side, how do you understand how and where value accrues and grows and is preserved and protected and shared? And then how do you understand as well how it could be destroyed? That's a key point. So thinking back to those two examples, great examples of where value can suddenly shift to a different part of the value chain and the value system. So the next step, the facilitate debate step, is really all about that. It's facilitating debate around that value systems and structure to make sure that you really understand what is changing and what could change, and then therefore what you want to influence on an ongoing basis. Once you've done that, you will have a reasonable level of alignment across the team. You'll have a sense of what the vision of success could be, and probably you'll have a representation that you can all agree on around that, which is really, really powerful as you move into the next stage, because we go from the kind of expansive, creative, curious side of the process into something that's a bit more action-oriented, solution mode that we'll be more familiar with. So in the third step, we begin to innovate and mitigate. So we develop those projects, those actions, those activities that will help us to chart that path towards the vision that we've agreed on. It's really important at this point to highlight that Ruth and I do not say innovate or mitigate, and that very much links to the point I was making earlier about silos, because we tend to think of those two as separate things. So it's innovate and mitigate. Often the activities, the projects, the events that you plan will both mitigate and innovate potentially, depending on what happens across the life cycle of your game plan. So it's really, really important, just because you've moved into action mode, not to drop down into those traditional organizational silos. You've really got to resist that at this point in the process. But you also have to be kind of rigorous and disciplined about ensuring that when you say you're going to do something and when you agree it for the game plan, that actually gets delivered and someone is responsible for it. So we have lots of tools and tips and tricks to help you to do that. And then the fourth step, as I said, it's not the final step, but just the fourth step, is to enable your business to update the game plan on an ongoing basis, and also to anticipate what might happen next. One of the great problems we see in business is that we have a kind of a strategy day or an innovation workshop, that's 2 hours long, and then people walk out of the room and nothing happens with what's discussed. And it may be that, listening to this, that resonates with some of you in the room. I know certainly I've been in those meetings where you're so excited, we've got a plan, we've got something really interesting that we're going to do, and then you walk out of the room and no one can quite remember who was responsible, and did we really agree, and are we sure that that's what we want to do? So this is why the fourth step is so important, because this is all about actually building the game plan, building the actions that you've agreed into how you run your business on an ongoing basis. And that means, the regular meetings that you have, the review process, the KPIs, all of the performance measures around delivering that game plan. And part of that is actually ensuring that, when you stimulated and motivated at the beginning of the framework, that actually that was an injection of new stuff. That's not a sustainable way to run this. You have to actually have an ongoing injection of new stuff, but you also have to have a really curious organization, which is constantly looking out for signals of change, new ways of doing things, new entrants to the market, because otherwise your game plan becomes vulnerable to disruption itself. And that's the last thing we want, is to set out a game plan for disruption and then to forget to update it and for it to be disrupted. So Ruth and I are really, really passionate about trying to make this easier for leaders, because we know that you're dealing on an ongoing basis with so many challenges, and many of them are immediate, urgent threats, particularly in a time of disruption. But of course, as I said earlier, what we know for sure is that, this is just the latest in a string of disruptions. And, looking forward, perhaps the greatest disruption that we face is climate change and the impact of that on our businesses. So now more than ever, you need to have a game plan. And there are two things that you really need. First of all, you need to be curious about what could happen to your business. And secondly, you need to be energized about how you're going to deal with it, because in the absence of those two things, in the absence of a game plan, you're going to hit choppy waters very quickly. We'd love to talk to you following this short talk and hear, first of all, what you thought about the stories, what you think about the framework, and actually what your concerns and issues are in your own business. And I think we've got some time to do that now. So I really look forward to talking to you.